You're nothing but a racist relic in a fancy suit." Maxine Waters' accusation cracked through the Senate Banking Committee hearing like lightning in July. But in the next 55 minutes, the gentleman from Louisiana would teach a masterclass in how to destroy someone with nothing but facts, figures, and impeccable manners. What followed wasn't just political theater. It was Southern justice served colder than sweet tea in January. This is the story of how Senator John Kennedy turned Maxine Waters' attack into her final downfall. And he did it all without ever raising his voice. The Senate Banking Committee hearing room hummed with the quiet efficiency of a Tuesday morning devoted to the mundane but necessary work of government. Community banking regulations weren't exactly thrilling television, which explained why only C-SPAN cameras captured the proceedings. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat in his usual spot, reading glasses perched on his nose, making notes on a legal pad with the careful precision of a man who'd spent decades as a lawyer before entering politics. At 71 years old, Kennedy cut an interesting figure. Oxford-educated but Louisiana-bred, capable of quoting Aristotle and Boudreaux's fishing wisdom in the same breath. His suit was conservative but well-tailored. His silver hair neatly combed his demeanor, that of a man completely comfortable with who he was. The morning's discussion had reached the particularly dry topic of Dodd-Frank compliance costs when the hearing room's double doors burst open with enough force to make them bang against the walls. Maxine Waters strode in like an avenging angel, her presence immediately commanding attention. At 84, she moved with the righteous fury of someone who believed she was on a moral crusade. "Stop this charade immediately," Waters' voice boomed through the chamber. "I have urgent ethical concerns that this committee must address." Committee Chairman Mike Crow looked up startled. "Representative Waters, this is a closed committee session. You can't simply 'I can and I will' when a racist relic is making decisions that affect black communities." Waters pointed directly at Kennedy. "This man represents everything wrong with the Old South racism wrapped in a suit and a folksy accent." The room fell silent. Committee staffers froze mid-typing. Even the C-SPAN camera operator seemed to hold his breath. Such a direct personal attack was extraordinary, even by Washington standards. Kennedy slowly removed his reading glasses, pulled out a handkerchief, and began cleaning them with methodical care. The silence stretched as he completed this ritual, then carefully folded the handkerchief and returned it to his pocket. When he finally looked up at Waters, his expression was one of mild curiosity rather than anger. "Well," he said in his distinctive Louisiana drawl, "bless your heart, Ms. Waters." The phrase hung in the air. Anyone from the South knew that "bless your heart" could mean many things. And rarely was it an actual blessing. Kennedy reached down to his old leather briefcase, the same one he'd carried since his days as a private attorney, and withdrew a slim manila folder. His movements were unhurried, almost leisurely, as if he had all the time in the world. "Since you're here to discuss ethics," he continued, his voice carrying the musical cadence of the bayou, "perhaps this is providential. You see, I've been meaning to have a conversation about that very subject." He placed the folder on the desk in front of him, the label clearly visible to the cameras, and everyone in the room read, "Waters, financial disclosures discrepancies." Waters' confident posture faltered for just a moment. "What is that supposed to be?" "Oh, just some light reading I've been doing," Kennedy replied, opening the folder with deliberate slowness. "You know how U.S. racist relics like to pass the time reading financial documents, comparing public statements with bank records, that sort of thing." Senator John Kennedy, his full name, which he rarely used, had been preparing for this moment for months. Not because he'd expected Waters to burst into a committee hearing, but because he believed in the Boy Scout motto, "Be prepared." When you've spent your career prosecuting financial crimes, you develop instincts about which politicians' books don't quite add up. "Mr. Chairman," Kennedy addressed Crow without taking his eyes off Waters, "I believe Ms. Waters has raised important questions about ethics. Since she's taken the trouble to join us, perhaps we should explore this topic fully." Crow, sensing something significant was about to unfold, nodded slowly. "The chair recognizes the senator from Louisiana for ethics discussion." Kennedy pulled out his pocket watch, an antique that had belonged to his grandfather, and placed it on the desk. "I do believe we have about 49 minutes before the scheduled recess. That should be sufficient." He looked up at Waters with the expression of a man about to tell a bedtime story to children. Shall we begin? I promise to use small words so this racist relic's meaning is clear. Waters, still standing, seemed uncertain whether to stay or flee. Pride won. She pulled out a chair at the witness table and sat down. Her chin raised defiantly. I'm not afraid of your manufactured accusations. Manufactured? Kennedy's eyebrows rose slightly. Oh, no, ma'am, these are quite real. As real as that $4.5 million mansion you live in. But I'm getting ahead of myself. He adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. Let me tell you a story about a bank in Boston, a congresswoman in California, and what my grandfather would have called hen house business. It's quite educational. The trap had been set with perfect Southern courtesy. The committee members leaned forward, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Kennedy's aide, a young woman from Baton Rouge, allowed herself a small smile. The senator had been right. Patience and preparation beat righteous fury every time. Chapter 1. Kennedy said with the air of a professor beginning a lecture. How to save your husband's investment with just one phone call to the Treasury Secretary. Or, as we call it in Louisiana, family business done wrong. Waters's face had gone from confident to concerned. She'd walked into this hearing room expecting to face a caricature, a stereotype she could easily dismiss. Instead, she was facing something far more dangerous. A patient prosecutor with facts, figures, and 49 minutes to share them. The gentleman from Louisiana was about to teach a masterclass, and school was now in session. Senator Kennedy settled back in his chair with the comfortable air of a man about to tell a favorite story at a family barbecue. His voice took on an almost musical quality, the kind of cadence that made Louisiana storytelling an art form. Let me tell you a story. He began, fingers steepled in front of him. Once upon a time, December 2008 to be precise, there was a little bank in Boston called One United. Now, this bank was in a heap of trouble. The financial crisis was hitting everyone hard. But One United was in particularly dire straits. Waters interrupted, her voice sharp with indignation. That was investigated and cleared by the Ethics Committee. You're dredging up old false accusations. Cleared. Kennedy's eyebrows rose above his glasses, giving him the appearance of an owl who just heard something peculiar. Well, now that's interesting. I have different information here. He withdrew a document from his folder, holding it up to the light as if examining a questionable dollar bill. See, when the Ethics Committee says cleared, they sometimes mean given a stern talking to but not formally punished. Like when my grandson sneaks cookies before dinner. He's cleared, but everybody knows what he did. The committee room was silent except for the soft whir of the air conditioning. Kennedy continued, his voice never rising above conversational level. Your husband Sidney Williams owned quite a bit of stock in One United Bank. Says here $350 worth. That's a mighty big investment for a community bank. He peered over his glasses at Waters. Especially one that was about to fail. My husband's investments are his business. Indeed, they are. Kennedy agreed amiably. Right up until you pick up the phone and called Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson personally to arrange a meeting for that very bank. Then it becomes everybody's business. He produced another document, this one bearing the Treasury Department seal. September 2008, you arranged a meeting between One United executives and Treasury officials. Very kind of you to help a struggling bank. Of course, you didn't mention your husband's substantial investment. Waters' face flushed. I was helping a black-owned bank. It was about supporting minority communities. Was it now? Kennedy's tone remained conversational, but there was steel underneath the magnolia. Because that's interesting, too. You see, I have here a list of black-owned banks that were struggling during the crisis. 37 of them to be exact. He spread several pages across the desk, like a car dealer showing his hand. Carver Federal Savings Bank in New York, Citizens Trust Bank in Atlanta, First Independence Bank in Detroit, all black-owned, all desperately needing help, all serving minority communities. He looked up at Waters with an expression of genuine puzzlement. How many of these banks did you personally call Treasury about? The silence stretched. Waters' jaw worked as if she were chewing something bitter. I'll help you with the math, Kennedy said kindly. The answer is 0. The only black-owned bank you made calls for was the one your husband had $350 invested in. Coincidence? He shrugged. In Louisiana, we have a saying, when the fox guards the henhouse. Don't be surprised when chickens disappear. He pulled out another document. This one marked with sticky notes. But wait, as they say on those TV commercials, there's more. One United Bank received $12 million in TARP funds. 12 million taxpayer dollars. Your husband's investment was saved. The bank survived. The ethics committee found no wrongdoing. Waters began. No, ma'am, Kennedy corrected gently. The ethics committee found wrongdoing. They just didn't punish you for it. There's a difference, like finding termites in your house but deciding not to call the exterminator. He read from an official report. Representative Waters should have instructed her chief of staff to refrain from assisting One United once it became clear the bank would seek federal assistance. That's what they said. In plain English, you got caught but got away with it. The most damaging evidence came next. Kennedy produced a series of emails handling them delicately as if they might explode. These are from your chief of staff at the time. Internal communications that have recently come to light. Would you like me to read them aloud? Or would you prefer to admit what they say? Waters said nothing. Her hands gripped tightly in her lap. I'll take that as permission to proceed. Kennedy said, make sure there are no fingerprints on this. That's what your chief of staff wrote about your involvement with One United. No fingerprints. That's an interesting phrase, don't you think? Not something innocent people usually worry about. He looked around the committee room, making eye contact with each member. When I was a young lawyer in Louisiana, we had a case about a man who robbed a bank wearing gloves. His defense was that he always wore gloves. Even in summer. The jury didn't buy it. Innocent people don't worry about fingerprints. Waters found her voice again. You're twisting this into something it's not. This is about race. No, ma'am. Kennedy interrupted his voice. Still calm, but firmer now. Math isn't racist. It's just numbers. 37 Blackhound banks needed help. You helped one. The one that would have cost your family $350 if it failed. That's not racial justice. That's just regular old corruption with a racial justice label slapped on top. He closed this section of his folder with deliberate finality. You know what breaks my heart about this? Those other 36 banks. They served communities that desperately needed them. Some of them failed. Families lost their savings. Businesses couldn't get loans. But they didn't have a congresswoman's husband as an investor. So they didn't get that special phone call to Treasury. Kennedy checked his pocket watch. We're about 10 minutes in and we're just getting started. Should we move on to how your daughter made $750,000 from your campaign, or would you like to dispute these One United facts first? Waters sat in stony silence. Her earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist on the bayou. The committee members were transfixed. Even the staffers had stopped pretending to work. All eyes on the methodical destruction being carried out with perfect Southern manners. I'll take your silence as agreement that we should proceed, Kennedy said. Chapter 2. The remarkable business success of Karen Waters. Or as we call it in Louisiana, keeping it all in the family. The money that is. Kennedy carefully arranged a new set of documents on the desk, taking his time like a grandfather organizing family photos. The committee room remained dead silent. Everyone waiting to see what revelations would come next. Waters sat rigid in her chair. Her earlier fire replaced by the weariness of someone who'd realized they'd walked into a carefully prepared ambush. Your daughter Karen has an interesting occupation. Kennedy began his tone conversational. According to these Federal Election Commission reports, she runs something called slate mailers. Waters immediately bristled. Leave my family out of this. This is a personal attack. Oh, I'd love to leave your family out of it, Kennedy replied with a gentle smile. But that's mighty hard to do when they're literally on your campaign payroll. In fact, your daughter has been paid. He consulted his notes. $750 over the past decade. That's a lot of money for slate mailers. He adjusted his glasses and peered at Waters with the expression of a confused but kindly professor. Now, forgive this simple country lawyer, but could you explain what exactly a slate mailer is? Because I've been looking for these mailers, and they're harder to find than crawfish in a drought. Waters' voice was tight. Slate mailers are legitimate campaign tools that inform voters. I'm sure they are, Kennedy interrupted smoothly. That's why I've been trying so hard to find them. My staff, bright young folks, very good with the internet. They've been searching high and low. We've checked with voters in your district libraries, campaign offices. It's the strangest thing. $750 worth of mailers and nobody seems to have received one. He pulled out a large piece of paper and began sketching a diagram with his fountain pen. The scratching sound filled the silent room as he drew circles and arrows. "Let me show you what we did find," he said, drawing as he talked. "Money flows from your campaign contributors. Here," he drew an arrow to your campaign account. "Here, another arrow to your daughter Karen's company. Here another arrow for Slate mailer services that nobody can find. A final arrow, and then interesting things, similar amounts show up in your personal expenses." He looked up from his drawing. "In Louisiana we have a similar system. It's called a washing machine. Money goes in dirty, comes out clean. Of course, that's usually at the laundromat, not the campaign office. This is preposterous." Waters began. "Is it?" Kennedy produced a thick stack of bank records. "Let's look at some specific transactions. October 2018. Your campaign pays Karen's company $35 for voter outreach services. That same month, you make a $33 payment on your husband's Porsche. Coincidence? March 2019. Campaign pays Karen $42 for Slate mailer production. 2 days later, you book a $40 vacation to the Bahamas. Another coincidence. July 2020. Karen gets $28 for community engagement. Within a week, you're writing a check for $27,500 lured to a jewelry store in Beverly Hills." Kennedy looked up. "That's a lot of coincidences. In fact, over 10 years, we found 47 such coincidences. That's more coincidences than my cousin Beauregard's fishing stories. And he's a notorious liar." The committee members were leaning forward now, several taking notes. Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia cleared his throat. "John, are you saying the money went in a circle?" "Joe, I'm not just saying it," Kennedy replied. "I'm showing it. It's like a merry-go-round, except instead of painted horses, it's got $100 bills." He pulled out another document. "But Karen's not the only family member on the payroll. Let's see here. Your grandson got paid for consulting services. He was 23 years old at the time. Fresh out of college. Must be quite a consultant to earn $40 from grandma's campaign." Waters' face was flushed now, anger replacing embarrassment. "You're just a racist attacking a strong black woman. You can't stand to see." Kennedy held up a hand, his expression patient. "Ma'am, I'm not attacking you. I'm just reading." He held up the documents. "These numbers did all the attacking. I'm just the messenger. A very polite messenger, I might add. Haven't raised my voice once." A few committee members actually chuckled at that, breaking the tension momentarily. Even the C-SPAN camera operator seemed to adjust his angle to better capture the scene. "You know what's interesting?" Kennedy continued, returning to his documents? "The IRS should have caught this. This kind of circular money flow. It's usually a big red flag. But somehow, mysteriously, your returns never got audited. Not once in 10 years. That's like winning the lottery. Except in reverse." He produced another paper. "We did some checking. Turns out several IRS employees who were assigned to review campaign finances in your district got mysteriously reassigned. Promoted to other departments. Moved to different states. Almost like someone was playing chess with IRS personnel. You're suggesting I control the IRS?" Waters scoffed. "No, ma'am," Kennedy replied mildly. "I'm suggesting you have friends in high places. There's a difference. One's a conspiracy theory. The other's just how Washington works." Unfortunately, he began gathering up the financial documents, organizing them into neat piles. Total family enrichment from campaign funds, $1.2 million. That's not including the hard-to-trace stuff. In Louisiana, we have casinos that don't move that much money without somebody noticing. But here's what really bothers me," Kennedy said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "That money came from donors. Regular folks who believed in you. People living in your district. Which, by the way, you don't actually live in. Who scraped together $25 or $50 because they thought you were fighting for them." He looked directly at Waters. "They weren't donating to the Karen Waters Enrichment Fund. They weren't contributing to the grandchildren's consulting firm. They were trying to support democracy. Instead, they were supporting your family's lifestyle." Checking his pocket watch, Kennedy nodded. "We're making good time. Should we discuss your real estate portfolio next? Because that's where things get really interesting. How does someone accumulate $8 million in property on a congressional salary? In Louisiana, we'd call that creative accounting. The FBI might call it something else." Waters sat silently. Her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The righteous fury she'd entered with had been replaced by something else. The dawning realization that this wasn't going to end well for her. Chapter 4. Kennedy announced cheerfully. The curious case of the missing constituent. Or how to represent a district you don't even live in while living in a mansion your salary can't afford. It's quite a magic trick. Senator Kennedy pulled out a manila envelope with the air of a magician preparing his next trick. From it he withdrew several large glossy photographs, handling them with the same care one might use for family portraits. He arranged them on the desk facing the committee. Then selected one to hold up. "Beautiful home you have, Ms. Waters," he said, admiring the photo like an art collector. "This is your $4.5 million mansion in Hancock Park. 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, pool, outdoor kitchen. It's magnificent. Shows what 30 years of public service can buy you." Waters shifted uncomfortably. "There's nothing wrong with absolutely nothing wrong with owning a nice home." Kennedy agreed readily. "American dream and all that. Just one tiny problem." He pulled out a map of Los Angeles, unfolding it with theatrical precision. "Your mansion is here." He pointed with his pen. "And your district, the people you represent, they're way over here." And he drew a circle around a completely different area about as far apart as good sense and government spending. He pulled out more photographs, these showing a starkly different reality. "These are from your actual district. The 43rd, one of the poorest in California. Look at this. Homeless encampments just miles from your gate. Businesses boarded up. Folks living in conditions that would make a Depression-era Hooverville look like Beverly Hills." The split-screen effect was devastating. As Kennedy held up both photos, Watt's pristine mansion on one side, the urban decay of her district on the other. "You know what this reminds me of?" Kennedy mused. "Marie Antoinette. At least she had the excuse of living in France. You don't even live with your subjects. I mean constituents." Waters found her voice attempting to push back. "My residence has nothing to do with my effectiveness as a representative. Doesn't it?" Kennedy pulled out more documents. "Let's talk about presence or absence in your case. According to these records, you spent 47 days in your actual district last year. That's out of 365 for those keeping score. My dog spends more time in my neighbor's yard. And he's not supposed to be there at all." A few chuckles rippled through the committee room. Kennedy continued warming to his theme. But one mansion isn't enough. Apparently, more property photos emerged. "Here's another property. And another. And my goodness, is this a beach house? Total real estate portfolio value over $8 million on a congressional salary of $174 a year." He pulled out a calculator and began punching numbers with exaggerated concentration. "Let's see. Carry the one account for taxes. Assume you don't eat, don't buy clothes, don't pay utilities. It would take you approximately 246 years to afford all this. You must have one heck of a savings plan. What about your net worth?" Waters suddenly shot back, producing a paper from her own folder. "You're worth millions yourself." For the first time, Kennedy paused, seeming caught off guard. The room held its breath. Had Waters found a weakness? Kennedy adjusted his glasses, took the paper, and examined it. Then he smiled a genuine, almost grateful smile. "Well, that's a fair question. I appreciate you asking. It shows you did some homework." He nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. I'm worth about $3 million. Inherited most of it from my family's law firm. Been around since 1873. Every penny declared. Every investment transparent. Boring stuff. Really. Lots of municipal bonds. My financial advisor says I'm his most tedious client." He handed the paper back. "But here's the difference, Ms. Waters. I can show you where every dollar came from." "Can you?" Waters' momentary triumph deflated like a punctured balloon. Kennedy returned to his property photos. "The timing of your purchases is fascinating. This mansion here bought right after you helped pass legislation benefiting pharmaceutical companies. This one purchased just weeks after bank regulation bills that helped your husband's investments. It's like a shopping spree tied to the congressional calendar." He pulled out corporate documents. Shell companies, LLC formations, property transfers. It's like a spider web designed by a lawyer having a fever dream. In Louisiana, we see this pattern in exactly one type of case when someone's trying to hide where money came from. "But here's what really sticks in my craw," Kennedy said, his voice taking on an edge of genuine disgust. While you're living in your mansion, your constituents are suffering. Highest unemployment in the state. Worst schools. Crime that makes the evening news look like a horror movie. He pulled out constituent letters. These are from your district. Dear Representative Waters, my son was shot on his way to school. Miss Waters, we've been without clean water for months. Representative Waters, my business was destroyed in the riots. Letter after letter, begging for help. And where were you? He pulled out social media posts. Here you are at a Hollywood fundraiser. Here you are at your beach house. Here you are at a Swiss banking conference. That must have been interesting. Everywhere except where people needed you. Kennedy leaned back, studying Waters, with an expression that mixed disappointment with contempt. You know what we call someone who takes the pay but doesn't show up for work in Louisiana fired. But apparently in California, you call them representative. He began gathering up the property documents. $8 million in real estate. Less than 50 days a year in your district. It's like you're playing Monopoly with real people's lives. Except in Monopoly, you eventually have to go past go. You just go past your district on the way to your mansion. The committee room was dead silent. Several members were looking at Waters with expressions that ranged from disgust to disbelief. Even her potential allies seemed to be distancing themselves, literally leaning away from her side of the room. We're about halfway through our 49 minutes. Kennedy noted, checking his watch. Should we discuss your communication style next? Because that's where things go from financially questionable to downright dangerous. Chapter 5. How your words became weapons in other people's hands. Kennedy's demeanor shifted subtly as he opened the next section of his folder. The folksy storyteller was still there. But underneath was something harder. The prosecutor who'd sent dangerous people to prison. He pulled out a tablet and connected it to the committee room's audio system. Now we get to the ugly part. He said quietly, your words, Ms. Waters, have consequences. In the South, we're taught that words have power. You can build with them or burn with them. You seem to prefer matches to hammers. He pressed play on the tablet. Waters' voice filled the room. If you see anybody from that cabinet, in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them and you tell them they're not welcome anymore anywhere. The recording continued with more clips. I will take Trump out tonight. I threaten Trump supporters all the time. Make them pay. Kennedy paused the playback. Strong words. Fighting words. Some might say. The kind of words that in Louisiana would have my grandmother reaching for her switch to teach me some manners. Waters straightened in her chair. I was fighting against injustice. Sometimes you have to what? Kennedy interrupted his voice, still calm, but with steel underneath. Incite violence because that's what happened. Let me show you the consequences of your fighting words. He pulled out a stack of photos and police reports. Sarah Henderson, restaurant owner in Los Angeles. After your pushback speech, a mob showed up at her establishment because someone said a Trump official ate there. Wasn't true, but truth doesn't matter to mobs. They destroyed her restaurant. 20 years she'd been in business. Gone in one night. Next photo. Marcus Chen, immigrant from Taiwan, wore a red hat that someone thought was MAGA. It was a Cincinnati Reds hat. Beaten so badly he spent 2 weeks in the hospital. His attacker specifically cited your words as inspiration. Another, the Thompson family. Their car had a Republican bumper sticker surrounded at a gas station by people screaming your exact words. Their 10-year-old daughter still has nightmares. The committee room was tomb silent as Kennedy methodically presented victim after victim. Real people, real consequences, all traceable to Waters' inflammatory rhetoric. But here's what's really interesting. Kennedy continued, you're very selective about your outrage. He pulled out a comparison chart. When Democrats are accused of crimes, actual crimes with evidence, you call for due process and presumption of innocence. But for your political opponents, you call for harassment, imprisonment, even violence without any trial at all. Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia cleared his throat. John's right about this, he said, surprising everyone. I've been concerned about the rhetoric for a while now. Violence is violence regardless of which party inspires it. Waters turned to Manchin, shocked by the Democrat breaking ranks. Joe, you can't seriously be. I am seriously. Manchin replied firmly. When people get hurt because of words from leaders, party doesn't matter. Wrong is wrong. Kennedy nodded gratefully to Manchin. Thank you, Joe. See, that's what we call principle. Standing for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. He returned to his documents. But let's look at what you don't get outraged about, Ms. Waters. Your district has one of the highest murder rates in California. Where are your passionate speeches about that gang violence killing children? Where's your call to push back against that? He pulled out crime statistics. 317 murders in your district last year. You made 317 speeches about Trump. Interesting priorities. It's like being worried about mosquitoes while alligators are eating your neighbors. That's not fair. Waters began. Fair. Kennedy's eyebrows rose. Let me tell you about fair. Angela Rodriguez, age 8, killed by a stray bullet in your district. Her mother wrote you begging for help with crime in their neighborhood. You never responded, but you had time to go on CNN that same week calling for people to confront Republicans in public. He pulled out more letters. James Washington, small business owner. His store was robbed 6 times in 1 year. Begged for help. Nothing. Maria Santos, teacher. Her school has no heat. No proper books. Silence from you. But let a Republican show up at a restaurant and suddenly you find your voice. Kennedy's tone grew more pointed. You know what this looks like to regular folks. Like you care more about fighting Trump than fighting for them. Like their suffering is less important than your political theater. He pulled out one final item from this section. A video player. This is from last month. You had a $50 a plate fundraiser in Beverly Hills. Let's listen. Waters' voice came through clearly. My constituents. They're lucky to have me. Where else are they going to go? They'll vote for me no matter what I do. The contempt in her voice was unmistakable. Several committee members visibly recoiled. That's taken out of context. Waters protested weakly. Is it? Kennedy asked. Because it sounds pretty clear to me. You see your constituents as captive voters. Not people deserving representation. In Louisiana, we have a word for that kind of thinking. We call it shameful. He began closing this section of his folder. Words matter. Ms. Waters, when you call for confrontation, people get confronted. When you call for pushing back, people get pushed. And when innocent folks get hurt because of your words, their blood is partly on your hands. Checking his watch, Kennedy nodded. 20 minutes left. Time for Chapter 6. Your new friend Sam Bankman-Fried and the FTX connection. Or as we call it in Louisiana, taking candy from a baby if the baby was a billion-dollar fraudster. Kennedy pulled out a fresh folder. This one notably thicker than the others. His expression had shifted from disappointment to something approaching genuine disgust. He arranged several photographs on the desk, each showing Waters at various glamorous events. Let's talk about your new friend. Sam. Kennedy began, his voice carrying a harder edge. Sam Bankman-Fried. The boy genius who wasn't the crypto king who turned out to be a common thief with a laptop. Waters immediately went on the defensive. I had no way of knowing. Didn't you? Kennedy interrupted, pulling out donation records. Because you sure took his money fast enough. According to these FEC filings, you received over $150 in FTX-related contributions. That's a lot of crypto confidence for someone who had no way of knowing. He displayed a photo from a private fundraiser. Here you are with young Sam at a Beverly Hills mansion. March 2022. You called him, and I quote, a brilliant innovator bringing financial access to the underserved. That's interesting since what he actually brought was financial destruction to anyone who trusted him. Kennedy pulled out email printouts. But you didn't just take his money. You actively protected him. Here's correspondence between your office and the SEC about proposed cryptocurrency regulations. You fought every single measure that would have required transparency from FTX. Cryptocurrency regulation is complex. Waters began. Is it? Kennedy asked. Because it seems pretty simple to me. When someone's handling billions of other people's dollars, maybe they should show where it's going. That's not complex. That's common sense. In Louisiana, we call it showing your cards. He pulled out more documents. Here's what makes this especially interesting. While you were killing regulation bills, you were also getting briefings about concerns with FTX. The FBI had flagged suspicious activity. The SEC had concerns. Treasury was worried, but you kept right on protecting Sam and taking his money. Suddenly, the committee room doors opened. A young woman in a conservative suit entered, looking nervous but determined. Kennedy smiled. Ah, perfect timing. Committee members, this is Jennifer Walsh, formerly of Representative Waters' staff. Waters' face went white. Jennifer, what are you? I'm doing what I should have done months ago. Jennifer replied, her voice shaking but clear. She handed Kennedy a USB drive that contains recordings and documents about the FTX relationship. I couldn't watch people lose their life savings anymore while we protected the person stealing from them. Kennedy accepted the drive with a grave nod. Thank you, Ms. Walsh. That takes courage. He turned back to Waters. Your own staff couldn't stomach it anymore. Should we see what's on here? Without waiting for an answer, he plugged the drive into his tablet. Documents began appearing on the screen. Emails, text messages, meeting notes. Oh my, Kennedy said, reading. This is from you to SBF. Don't worry about the regulations. I'll handle it. Just remember our arrangement. He looked up. What arrangement would that be? Ms. Waters. More documents appeared. Financial transfers to various Waters-connected entities. Meeting logs showing far more contact than officially reported. Photos of Waters' family members at FTX events. But here's the smoking gun, Kennedy said, pulling up a particular email. You weren't just protecting FTX. You were actively steering other Democrats to take his money. You were the gateway drug dealer introducing your colleagues to Sam's tainted cash. He displayed a spreadsheet. 43 Democratic representatives and senators who took FTX money after you vouched for Sam. Total contributions 38 years. $1 million. You didn't just sell your own soul. You were the broker for others. Jennifer Walsh spoke up from where she stood. She knew. We all knew. The red flags were everywhere. But the money was too good to pass up. She said it was about building Democratic power. It was really about building her power. Kennedy nodded sympathetically. It must have been hard watching this happen from the inside. The worst part, Jennifer continued, was seeing regular people from her district who had invested in FTX because she endorsed it. They lost everything. Retirement savings, college funds, life savings gone while she was cashing checks. Waters attempted to salvage something. This disgruntled former employee is clearly disgruntled. Kennedy interrupted. I'd be disgruntled, too, if my boss was helping a con man steal billions. That's not disgruntled. That's disgusted. There's a difference. He pulled out victim impact statements. Maria Gonzalez, constituent from your district, put her daughter's college fund in FTX because you said it was safe. Gone. Robert Johnson, veteran, his disability settlement invested because you endorsed SBF vanished. Should I continue? The committee room was heavy with judgment. Even Democrats who might have defended Waters were maintaining careful silence. The evidence was too damning. The betrayal too complete. But here's what really gets me, Kennedy said, his Louisiana accent thickening with emotion. You positioned yourself as a protector of the little people against big banks. Then you helped the biggest banking fraud in history happen right under your nose. No, not under your nose with your blessing and protection. He pulled out one final document from the FTX file. Congressional Ethics Office preliminary finding Representative Waters' relationship with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried requires immediate investigation for possible criminal referral. That was issued yesterday. You probably haven't seen it yet. Toad is slumped in her chair. The weight of accumulated revelations finally breaking through her defenses. 12 minutes left, Kennedy announced, checking his pocket watch. Just enough time for the grand finale. Chapter 7. What your former chief of staff recorded for the FBI. Fair warning, this is where it gets really ugly. Kennedy reached into his briefcase one final time, withdrawing an old-styled tape recorder that looked like it had come from a 1970s police evidence locker. He placed it on the desk with deliberate care, the click of metal on wood echoing through the silent chamber. Your former chief of staff, Michael Patterson, had what we call a come-to-Jesus moment. Kennedy began his voice, carrying the weight of what was to come. After 20 years of working for you, his conscience finally won out over his paycheck. He came to the FBI with quite a story and more importantly with recordings. Waters' face had gone from pale to ashen. That's illegal. You can't record without. Actually, Kennedy interrupted gently. In the District of Columbia, it's one-party consent. Mr. Patterson could legally record his own conversations. And boy did he record some doozies. He pressed play on the recorder. Waters' unmistakable voice filled the room. Chase Bank wants to merge with that credit union. Tell them it is $2 million to the foundation or I'll block it in committee. Make sure they understand pay up or get buried in hearings. Kennedy paused the tape. That's what we call extortion in Louisiana. Of course, we usually see it in mob cases, not congressional offices. He pressed play again. Another conversation. Bank of America thinks they can ignore me. Schedule hearings for next month. Make them sweat. When they come begging, the price goes up to $3 million. That'll teach them whose committee this is. The committee members sat in stunned silence. Even in Washington's swamp, this level of blatant corruption was shocking. But wait, Kennedy said, mimicking a late-night TV salesman. There's more. He fast-forwarded to another section and pressed play. Waters' voice laughing. These idiots in my district will vote for me no matter what. Where else are they going to go? They're too stupid to understand finance anyway. As long as I keep talking about racism and Trump, they'll line up like sheep. Several committee members audibly gasped. The contempt in Waters' voice was unmistakable and ugly. Kennedy's expression had hardened into something approaching genuine anger. Too stupid. These are the people who trusted you, who believed you were fighting for them. Teachers, nurses, store owners, veterans, and you think they're stupid? He played another clip. I've got that IRS auditor handled. Sent him photos from his Vegas trip. The ones his wife doesn't know about. He'll make our little tax problems disappear. Blackmail, Kennedy said simply. Add that to the list. Waters was standing now, shaking with rage. This is a setup, a racist conspiracy. You doctored those recordings. Kennedy remained seated, calm as still water. Ma'am, these recordings have been authenticated by 3 independent forensic audio experts. Your former chief of staff testified under oath to their accuracy. He also provided corroborating documents for every conversation. He pulled out a sworn affidavit. Mr. Patterson's statement. I recorded these conversations because I knew someday someone would need proof. I watched her destroy people who wouldn't pay. I watched her mock the very constituents who kept electing her. I couldn't be part of it anymore. Kennedy played one final recording. This one different from the others. It was Waters talking to someone on the phone. The earthquake relief money. Take half for the district. The rest goes to our usual accounts. Those people are used to suffering. They won't notice if some money goes missing. Besides, I need to finish paying for the beach house. The room erupted. Even the most jaded Washington insiders couldn't stomach stealing earthquake relief funds. Committee members were talking over each other, calling for immediate action. Kennedy raised his hand for silence. This recording is from 2019. Haiti earthquake relief funds. $5 million meant for humanitarian aid. $2.5 million diverted to accounts connected to Ms. Waters. He looked directly at Waters, and for the first time his carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. People were dying. Children were trapped in rubble. And you were thinking about your beach house in Louisiana. We have words for someone like that. But I'm too much of a gentleman to use them in mixed company. Waters made one last desperate attempt. You can't prove any of this. It's all lies. And actually, Kennedy interrupted, pulling out a final document. We can prove all of it. This is a cooperation agreement between Michael Patterson and the Department of Justice. He's provided 18 boxes of documents. Bank records, emails, text messages, recording devices from your office. 5 years of evidence, all cataloged and ready for prosecution. He closed the folder with finality. The FBI raided your offices this morning while you were here calling me a racist. They have everything. Kennedy checked his pocket watch one last time. And that's 49 minutes exactly. Time's up. Ms. Waters, just like your career, the committee room erupted into controlled chaos. Senators who had sat in stunned silence throughout Kennedy's presentation suddenly found their voices all speaking at once. Chairman Carpo banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Quiet, we will have order, Crepo finally shouted. When the room settled, his face showed the strain of processing what they just witnessed. I think we need to address what we've just heard. Senator Manchin was the first to speak coherently. I move for an immediate ethics investigation with criminal referral to the Department of Justice. All of it, every crime documented here today. Seconded came from multiple voices, both Republican and Democrat. The bipartisan unity was unprecedented. Waters had no allies left in the room. She stood alone at the witness table. Her earlier fury replaced by something between desperation and disbelief. You can't do this. I have immunity. The speech and debate clause doesn't cover extortion, bribery, or theft. Senator Ted Cruz interjected, "You might want to stop talking. Representative Waters, everything you say is being recorded. And you've already confessed to enough crimes to fill a prison wing." Kennedy remained seated methodically, organizing his documents back into their folders. His movements were unhurried, almost peaceful, like a man finishing a satisfying day's work. "In Louisiana," he said, not looking up from his papers, "we have many sayings. One my grandmother was fond of was, 'You can't polish a sneaker and call it a church shoe.' Another was, 'The truth will out, even if it takes time.'" He finally looked up at Waters. "Your time, Ms. Waters, has come due. 40 years of corruption, all documented, all proven. I take no pleasure in this corruption, saddens me. Whatever the party, but justice delayed is justice denied. And these people," he gestured toward the gallery, "have been denied justice for far too long." Waters attempted one more defense. "This is about race. You can't stand to see a powerful black woman." "Ma'am," Kennedy interrupted with infinite patience, "corruption has no color. Theft has no race. Betrayal of public trust knows no party. You didn't steal from white folks or black folks. You stole from folks. Period. You didn't betray Democrats or Republicans. You betrayed Americans." He stood slowly gathering his briefcase. "You know what the real tragedy is? You could have been a champion for your district. Could have used your seniority and power to lift people up. Instead, you used them as stepping stones to lift yourself up. That's not racism talking. That's just arithmetic." Senator Warren, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. "I came into this hearing prepared to defend a colleague against what I assumed would be partisan attacks. Instead, I've witnessed I don't even have words. Ms. Waters, how could you?" Waters had no answer. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. "Mr. Chairman," Kennedy addressed Crapo, "I believe my work here is done. I trust the committee will take appropriate action." He checked his pocket watch one more time. "And I do believe I can make the 12:15 flight back to New Orleans if I hurry. My granddaughter has a piano recital tonight, and I promised I'd be there." As he walked toward the exit, he paused beside Waters's table. "One last piece of Louisiana wisdom. Ms. Waters, my grandfather used to say, when you're in a hole, stop digging. You might want to remember that when the FBI interviews you." He tipped an imaginary hat. "You all have a blessed day." Now, the committee voted unanimously on every motion. Immediate ethics investigation, criminal referrals to the DOJ subpoena of all financial records, and a recommendation for Waters to be stripped of committee positions pending investigation. The votes took less than 5 minutes, but they ended an era. As Waters stumbled toward the exit, no one met her eyes. Democrats, Republicans, staff members, security, all looked away as if she were already a ghost. The woman who had wielded power like a club for decades left that room with nothing but the promise of prosecution. Outside the committee room, reporters swarmed, but Waters had no words. Her driver helped her into the car as cameras flashed and questions were shouted. The last image captured was of Maxine Waters slumped in the back seat, her face a mask of disbelief and defeat. Meanwhile, Kennedy was already in a cab to Reagan National Airport calling his wife. "Yes, dear, I'll make the recital. How just had to take out 40 years of trash. You know how it is, sometimes the mess piles up until someone finally decides to clean house." 3 months after the hearing that ended Maxine Waters' 40-year career, Senator John Kennedy sat in his Louisiana office overlooking the lazy curve of the Mississippi River. Morning mist rose from the water, and somewhere in the distance a mockingbee bird ran through its repertoire of borrowed songs. A fitting soundtrack for reflecting on a career built on exposing those who borrowed credibility they hadn't earned. The news had been relentless since that Tuesday morning. Waters had been forced to resign from all committee positions within a week. Federal investigators had raided multiple properties, seizing boxes of evidence that corroborated everything Kennedy had revealed and more. 43 other members of Congress had been implicated in various schemes, creating a corruption scandal that dwarfed anything in recent memory. Waters herself was under indictment on 67 federal charges ranging from extortion to money laundering. Her properties had been frozen as proceeds of criminal enterprise. The $4.5 million mansion in Hancock Park had a "for sale by U.S. government" sign in front of it. Her children were cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for leniency. A knock on Kennedy's door interrupted his reverie. His assistant entered carrying a stack of letters. More thank you notes, Senator, she said, placing them on his desk. Mostly from people in W's former district. Kennedy picked up one at random and read, Dear Senator Kennedy, thank you for showing the world what we've known for years. That she didn't care about us. Maybe now we can get a representative who actually lives here and fights for us. God bless you. It's a shame it took so long. Kennedy mused. 40 years is a long time for people to suffer under corrupt leadership. His assistant hesitated at the door. Senator, some people are saying you were too harsh. That you destroyed her on national television. Kennedy swiveled his chair to face her fully. Let me tell you something. Young lady, I didn't destroy Maxine Waters. She destroyed herself with 40 years of corruption. I just held up a mirror. Sometimes the truth looks harsh because the lies have been so pretty for so long. After she left, Kennedy returned to staring at the river. His phone rang. Reporters wanting comments. Colleagues wanting to congratulate him. Political operatives wanting to know who was next. He ignored them all. The work was done, and he had no interest in victory laps. That weekend he was back in Louisiana fishing in the bayou with his old friend Claude Boudreau. They sat in comfortable silence lines in the water watching the sun paint the cypress trees gold. Heard you caused quite a stir-up in Washington. Claude finally said. Just did a little house cleaning. Kennedy replied. Heard that woman called you a racist. Kennedy chuckled. Seems like everybody's a racist these days. If they disagree with somebody. Words lost all meaning like a dollar in inflation. You think things will change? Kennedy considered this as he reeled in his line to check the bait. You know, Claude, corruption's like kudzu. You can cut it back, but it'll always try to grow again. Best you can do is keep trimming it when you see it. Let folks know you're watching. They fished in silence for a while longer before Claude asked. Any regrets about how it went down? Just one, Kennedy said. I regret it took 40 years for someone to do it. Think of all the people who suffered while she lived high on their hopes. That's the real crime, not just the money she stole, but the faith she betrayed. As the sun set over the bayou, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, that no amount of corruption could taint, Kennedy reflected on the lesson of it all. In Washington, power was currency, and too many treated it like a personal piggy bank rather than a public trust. But every now and then, someone had to remind them that the bills come due eventually. You heading back to Washington tomorrow? Claude asked. Yep. Banking committee meeting on Tuesday. Routine stuff. But that's the job. Any more fireworks planned? Kennedy smiled. Not planning any, but I keep my files updated just in case. Like the Boy Scouts say. Be prepared. You never know when someone's going to bust into a hearing room making accusations they can't back up. As they paddled back to the dock in the fading light, Kennedy thought about Waters one last time. She was facing the rest of her life in federal prison. Her family fortune gone. Her legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the wages of corruption. It wasn't a fate he'd wish on anyone, but it was one she'd earned with 40 years of choices, each one taking her further from the people she'd sworn to serve. That's all, folks, he murmured to himself, echoing the words he'd used to close that fateful hearing. Sometimes that's all there was to say. When justice finally caught up with injustice, the work was done, the truth was told, and the rest was up to the courts and the conscience of the American people. Back in Washington, in offices throughout the Capitol, other corrupt officials were nervously reviewing their finances, destroying documents, and wondering if they might be next to face the Kennedy treatment. The gentleman from Louisiana had sent a message in the most southern way possible. Polite, thorough, and absolutely devastating. The swamp hadn't been drained, but at least one alligator had been caught, and sometimes that was enough to make the others think twice before surfacing. As Kennedy often said, quoting his grandfather, you can't clean up all the world's messes, but you can sure make yours a little tidier. And on that Tuesday in March, he'd done exactly